When people imagine Victorian women, they often picture elegant dresses, grand houses, and afternoon tea. But before any of that could happen, every woman had to begin her day with a routine that would seem surprisingly difficult to modern eyes. There were no electric water heaters, no showers, no hair dryers, and in many homes, no indoor plumbing at all. A wealthy woman usually woke in a bedroom, warmed by a fireplace that had burned through the night. A servant might bring fresh water to her room before she even left her bed. Poor women, however, often woke in crowded homes where several family members shared a single room. During winter, the air could be cold enough to see one's breath indoors. The first task of the day was washing. Most women did not take a full bath every morning, but they did wash their face, neck, hands, and sometimes their upper body using a basin, a pitcher of water, soap, and a cloth. Water had to be heated on a stove or over a fire and carried by hand. In wealthier households, servants performed this work. In working-class homes, women usually did it themselves. Cleanliness was considered a sign of respectability, especially for women. Teeth also required attention. Toothpaste, as we know, it did not exist for much of the Victorian period. Many people used tooth powders made from chalk, charcoal, baking soda, or crushed minerals. Toothbrushes were available, although they were far more expensive than modern versions. Some people cleaned their teeth using cloths or homemade brushes. Hair care was another important part of the morning. Long hair was fashionable and could require considerable effort. Most women did not wash their hair, frequently because the process was time-consuming and difficult. Instead, they brushed it thoroughly every day. Many believed that 100 brush strokes would keep hair healthy and shiny. Brushes, combs, and hairpins were essential items for women of all social classes. Wealthy women often spent additional time arranging elaborate hairstyles, while working women usually chose simpler styles that stayed secure during physical labor. Clothing added another layer of complexity. A Victorian woman rarely slipped into a dress in a few minutes. Even an ordinary outfit involved several layers. Undergarments, stockings, petticoats, corsets, and outer garments all had to be put on correctly. For wealthy women, a maid often assisted with dressing. Poor women dressed themselves, but they still wore multiple layers for warmth, modesty, and practicality by the time breakfast arrived. A Victorian woman had already completed tasks that could take an hour or more. Whether she was the wife of a wealthy businessman, a servant working in a large house, a factory worker, or a mother caring for children, her day began with effort, preparation, and routines that modern people rarely have to think about. Something as simple as getting clean, dressing, and preparing for the day required time, labor, and patience in a world without modern conveniences. For many Victorian women, getting dressed was not a quick task completed in a few minutes. It was a slow and familiar ritual that marked the beginning of each day. As morning light entered bedrooms and kitchens across Britain, women of every social class prepared themselves for work, household duties, social visits, or family responsibilities. The clothing they wore revealed not only their personal taste, but also their place in society. A wealthy woman rarely began with her dress. Instead, she first put on a lightweight linen or cotton chemise, a simple garment worn next to the skin. This layer protected more expensive clothing from sweat and dirt. Over the chemise came drawers or loose undergarments, followed by stockings that were tied or fastened above the knee. Next came the corset. Contrary to many modern myths, not every Victorian woman tightly laced herself into an impossibly small waist. Most women wore corsets because they provided support for the back and helped heavy skirts sit properly. Working women often wore simpler, more practical corsets, while wealthy women sometimes owned several for different occasions. Once the corset was secured, one or more petticoats were added. These layers helped create the fashionable shape of the period while also providing warmth in cold weather. Only then was the outer dress put on. Depending on the decade, dresses could contain large sleeves, long trains, decorative buttons, lace, ribbons, and carefully arranged folds of fabric. A wealthy woman often needed assistance from a maid, especially when fastening complicated garments from behind. Poor women dressed quite differently. They still wore layers, but practicality mattered more than fashion. A factory worker, laundress, seamstress, or farmer's wife needed clothing that allowed movement and could survive hard work. Many working-class women owned only a few dresses and wore them repeatedly until the fabric became thin from years of use. Garments were patched, repaired, altered, and passed between family members whenever possible. New clothing represented a significant expense for many households. Color also reflected daily life. Darker fabrics often hid dirt better and lasted longer. Wealthier women could afford lighter colors, delicate fabrics, and garments intended for specific activities. Some dresses were worn only for visiting friends, attending church, taking tea, or going to evening events. As women dressed, they often prepared their hair as well. Hair was pinned, braided, curled, or arranged into neat styles depending on age and social status. Mirrors, brushes, combs, ribbons, and hairpins occupied dressing tables throughout the Victorian world. By the time a woman was fully dressed, she could be wearing several layers weighing many pounds. Yet to her, the process felt entirely ordinary. It was simply part of daily life. As the morning continued and breakfast was served, thousands of women stepped into their day wrapped in fabrics, laces, buttons, and traditions that defined an entire era, carrying out lives that were often far more demanding than their elegant appearance suggested. Although Victorian women lived in the same country and under the same queen, their daily lives could be completely different depending on how much money their families possessed. A wealthy woman and a poor woman might pass each other on the same street, yet their experiences from morning until night could seem as though they belonged to different worlds. In a large house, a wealthy woman often woke in a private bedroom furnished with curtains, carpets, wardrobes, and perhaps even a fireplace. Servants might already be downstairs preparing breakfast, lighting fires, cleaning rooms, and carrying water. She would have time to wash, dress carefully, arrange her hair, and enjoy a morning meal served at a table. Her day might include correspondence, reading, sewing, charity work, social visits, shopping, or preparing for an evening gathering. Yet even wealthy women were expected to manage households, supervise servants, and maintain a reputation for respectability. Life could be comfortable, but it was not entirely free of responsibility. For poor women, mornings often began much earlier and with far less comfort. Many families lived in crowded homes where several people shared a single room. Privacy was rare. Water had to be fetched, fires lit, food prepared, and children cared for before the day's work even began. Some women worked in factories, laundries, workshops, markets, or as domestic servants. Others took in sewing or washing to earn a small income. Their days were long and physically demanding. Clothing revealed many of these differences. Wealthy women owned dresses for different occasions and seasons. They could afford finer fabrics, decorative trims, and professional dressmakers. Poor women usually owned only a few dresses, wearing them repeatedly until the fabric became thin or damaged. Garments were carefully repaired because replacing them was expensive. Food also varied greatly. Wealthier households enjoyed fresh bread, meat, vegetables, tea, fruit, and desserts on a regular basis. Poor families often relied on bread, potatoes, porridge, soup, and whatever inexpensive food was available. During difficult times, many women worried constantly about feeding their children. Yet, despite these differences, women across social classes shared many common experiences. They worried about illness, cared for family members, washed clothes, mended garments, and faced the challenges of childbirth and motherhood. They exchanged advice with sisters, mothers, neighbors, and friends. They laughed together, shared stories, and found comfort in familiar routines. As evening approached, both rich and poor women often sat near a source of warmth. Whether a grand fireplace or a simple stove, the day's work gradually ended. Candles flickered softly. Needles moved through fabric as sewing continued by lamplight. Children drifted to sleep. Outside, the streets grew quiet. And although wealth could change many things, every woman eventually sought the same comforts: safety, family, rest, and hope for a better tomorrow. Few features were admired more in Victorian society than a woman's hair. Long, thick, healthy hair was considered a symbol of beauty, femininity, and good health. Many women spent years growing their hair, sometimes until it reached their waist or even lower. Unlike today, however, maintaining such hair required patience, time, and a great deal of daily care. Most Victorian women did not wash their hair every few days. In fact, many washed it only once every few weeks. This was not because they disliked cleanliness, but because washing long hair was a difficult task. Water had to be heated, carried by hand, and poured carefully into basins or tubs. Drying thick hair could take many hours, especially during cold weather when homes were damp and poorly heated. Instead of modern shampoos, women often used simple soaps, homemade cleansers, or herbal mixtures. Some rinsed their hair with diluted vinegar to increase shine. Others used infusions made from rosemary, lavender, chamomile, or other plants believed to strengthen the hair and improve its appearance. Recipes were often passed from mothers to daughters and shared among friends, sisters, and neighbors. Daily brushing formed the most important part of hair care. Many women believed that brushing the hair 100 times each evening distributed natural oils and kept it glossy. Whether the exact number mattered or not, brushing was considered essential. Hairbrushes, combs, and hairpins were treasured personal items found in homes across every social class. Wealthier women sometimes owned beautifully decorated silver brushes, while working women used simpler wooden tools. Hairstyles varied depending on age, fashion, and occupation. Young women often wore their hair in braids, twists, or carefully arranged buns. Elaborate styles became especially popular for social events and formal occasions. Preparing hair for a ball could take hours and often required assistance. Some women used curling papers heated near the fire, while others slept with their hair wrapped around strips of fabric to create curls by morning. Not every aspect of hair care was pleasant. Lice remained a common problem throughout the Victorian period, especially among poorer families living in crowded conditions. Women relied on fine combs, frequent brushing, and various homemade remedies to deal with infestations. Cleanliness helped, but even respectable households sometimes faced such problems. Hair also carried emotional significance. Locks of hair were often saved as keepsakes, exchanged between loved ones, or preserved after a family member died. Some people even created jewelry containing woven strands of hair as a way of remembering relatives and friends. As evening arrived and lamps glowed softly inside Victorian homes, many women sat quietly brushing their hair before bed. The repetitive motion became part of the day's general ending. Outside, rain might fall against the windows or wind might move through the streets, but indoors the familiar rhythm of brush strokes continued. It was a simple ritual repeated thousands of times across the Victorian world, linking generations of women through habits that had changed very little for centuries. Among all the subjects that shaped a Victorian woman's life, few were discussed as quietly as menstruation. It was a natural part of life experienced by nearly every woman, yet it was often spoken of in whispers or not mentioned at all. Many girls entered puberty with only a vague understanding of what would happen to their bodies. Some mothers carefully explained the changes that awaited their daughters, while others believed such matters should remain unspoken until absolutely necessary. Older sisters, aunts, female cousins, and even household servants often became important sources of knowledge. A girl's first monthly cycle could be frightening if she had received little preparation, which was not uncommon during the 19th century. Without modern sanitary products, women relied on reusable cloths made from linen, cotton, flannel, or other absorbent fabrics. These cloths were folded several times and worn beneath layers of undergarments. Wealthier women could afford softer fabrics and larger supplies, allowing them to change cloths more frequently. Poorer women often used whatever material was available, including pieces cut from worn garments that could no longer be repaired. After use, the cloths needed to be washed by hand. This was usually done privately using hot water and soap. The cloths were then dried and stored for future use. In many households, women preferred to dry them discreetly, where male family members or visitors would not see them. Such tasks formed an ordinary part of life, even if they were rarely discussed openly. Monthly discomfort varied greatly from woman to woman. Some experienced only mild symptoms, while others suffered from painful cramps, headaches, fatigue, dizziness, or back pain. Modern pain relievers did not exist, so women depended on remedies passed from one generation to the next. Warm bricks wrapped in cloth were sometimes placed near the feet or lower abdomen. Herbal teas made from chamomile, peppermint, ginger, or other plants were popular. Rest was often recommended, although many women simply could not afford to stop working. Factory workers, servants, laundresses, farmers' wives, and mothers continued their daily responsibilities regardless of discomfort. Various superstitions surrounded menstruation as well. In some communities, people believed that a menstruating woman should avoid certain household tasks or food preparation. Others feared that she might affect plants, dairy products, or preserved foods. These beliefs vary from place to place, reflecting how little was scientifically understood about the female body at the time. Yet despite silence, discomfort, and misunderstanding, women developed practical ways to manage their monthly cycles. They shared advice with daughters and friends, exchanged remedies, and relied on knowledge passed through generations. As evening fell across Victorian homes, countless women quietly carried on with sewing, cooking, childcare, laundry, and household work, dealing with their monthly cycles in much the same way women had done for centuries. It was an ordinary part of life, rarely recorded in history books, yet deeply woven into the daily experiences of women throughout the Victorian world. For many people today, the idea of cleanliness begins with a hot shower, running water, and shelves filled with soaps and shampoos. Victorian women lived in a very different world. Yet, despite popular myths, most women cared deeply about personal hygiene and did their best to remain clean and presentable. The challenge was not a lack of concern, but a lack of convenience. Water did not flow from taps in most homes. Every bucket had to be carried, every kettle heated, and every bath carefully prepared. Because of this, a full bath was often a special event rather than a daily routine. In wealthy households, servants spent hours heating water and carrying it to large tubs placed in bedrooms or dressing rooms. The process required considerable effort. A single bath might involve dozens of trips carrying hot and cold water. For poorer women, the task was even more difficult. Families often shared a single tub, and bath day might occur only once a week or even less frequently during winter. Between baths, women relied on daily washing using basins, cloths, soap, and fresh water. Faces, hands, necks, and underarms received particular attention. Clean undergarments were also considered an important part of personal hygiene. Even when a full bath was impossible, changing linen helped maintain comfort and cleanliness. Intimate hygiene was rarely discussed publicly, but women developed practical routines based on knowledge passed between mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. Mild soaps, warm water, and clean cloths were commonly used. Much of this knowledge remained within female circles and was seldom mentioned in books written by men. Soap itself varied greatly. Some households purchased manufactured soaps, while others relied on homemade versions made from animal fats and lye. These soaps could be harsh compared to modern products, often leaving hands dry after repeated use. Women who spent hours washing clothes frequently suffered from cracked skin, especially during cold weather. The smell of a Victorian home would likely surprise modern visitors. Contrary to popular imagination, houses did not simply smell bad. Instead, they contained a mixture of scents. Coal smoke drifted from fireplaces, bread baked in ovens, furniture polish, candle wax, damp wool, fresh laundry, flowers, and cooking meals all contributed to the atmosphere. Wealthier families often placed lavender sachets in drawers and wardrobes. Rosewater remained popular for refreshing linens and handkerchiefs. Some women dabbed scented waters behind their ears or on, their gloves before social visits. During the evening, after the day's work was finished, many women washed again before bed. They brushed their hair, cleaned their hands, folded clothing, and prepared for another day. As lamps glowed softly and the house grew quiet, these small rituals brought comfort and order to daily life. In a world without modern plumbing, washing machines, or electric water heaters, cleanliness required patience, effort, and time. Yet Victorian women continued these routines faithfully, creating habits that helped them feel refreshed, respectable, and ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Long before beauty influencers, cosmetic counters, and modern skincare routines, Victorian women devoted considerable time to caring for their appearance. Beauty was closely connected to ideas of health, refinement, and social status. A woman was expected to look fresh, well-groomed, and respectable, but she also had to avoid appearing vain or overly concerned with fashion. Finding this balance became an art in itself. The ideal Victorian complexion was pale, smooth, and free from visible imperfections. A light skin tone suggested that a woman did not spend long hours working outdoors under the sun. Because of this, many women protected their skin with hats, bonnets, parasols, gloves, and long sleeves whenever they left the house. Even during summer, avoiding a tan was often considered desirable. Daily skincare routines were usually simple. Women washed their faces with water, mild soap, and soft cloths. Some preferred homemade cleansers made with milk, oatmeal, cucumber, rosewater, or honey. Mothers, grandmothers, and older sisters often shared recipes that had been passed through generations. Rosewater was especially popular because it left a pleasant scent and was believed to soothe the skin. Creams were often made at home using ingredients such as beeswax, almond oil, glycerin, lanolin, or floral extracts. Small jars stood on dressing tables beside brushes, mirrors, combs, and perfume bottles. During quiet evenings, many women sat by lamplight applying creams before bed, believing that careful skincare would preserve youthful beauty. Makeup occupied a complicated place in Victorian society. During much of the 19th century, obvious cosmetics were often associated with actresses, performers, or women considered socially improper. Respectable women were expected to appear naturally beautiful. Yet many still used cosmetic products discreetly. Rice powder helped reduce shine and create a smoother complexion. A gentle pinch on the cheeks or a light touch of homemade rouge could add color to the face. Some women even bit their lips to make them appear naturally red before social events. Unfortunately, not every beauty product was safe. Some cosmetic manufacturers included substances that modern science has proven to be dangerous. Lead, mercury, and arsenic appeared in certain beauty preparations designed to lighten the skin or remove blemishes. Women often had no idea that the products they trusted could harm their health over time. Despite these risks, advertisements promised miraculous results, and many customers believed them. Perfume also played an important role. Floral scents such as rose, violet, lavender, and jasmine were especially popular. Women lightly scented handkerchiefs, gloves, letters, and clothing. The fragrance was usually subtle rather than overwhelming. By evening, after the day's work and responsibilities were complete, many women returned to their dressing tables. They brushed their hair, washed their faces, applied creams, and prepared for sleep. In the soft glow of candlelight or an oil lamp, these quiet beauty rituals became moments of calm reflection. They were not simply about appearance. They offered comfort, routine, and a small sense of luxury in a world that often demanded patience, hard work, and self-discipline. Victorian women cared deeply about their appearance, but beauty meant very different things depending on a woman's social class. Wealthy ladies might sit at elegant dressing tables surrounded by bottles, powders, brushes, and perfumes, while poor women often relied on simple ingredients found in kitchens, gardens, or local markets. Yet, despite these differences, women from every background searched for ways to keep their skin soft, their hair healthy, and their appearance respectable. Many homemade beauty treatments were surprisingly gentle. Milk was sometimes used to wash the face because it was believed to soften the skin. Oatmeal mixed with water created a simple cleanser that could soothe irritation. Honey was valued for its moisturizing qualities, while cucumber slices were placed on the skin to reduce redness and swelling. Rosewater remained one of the most popular beauty products throughout the Victorian period. Women used it to freshen the face, scent handkerchiefs, and even add fragrance to bath water. Poor women often created their own remedies from ingredients they already possessed. A farm worker's wife or a laundress could not spend money on expensive cosmetics, but she might still prepare herbal infusions using chamomile, lavender, rosemary, or mint. Knowledge of such remedies was usually passed from mother to daughter and shared among female relatives, neighbors, and friends. However, not every beauty treatment was safe. During the 19th century, many cosmetic manufacturers promised miraculous results. Advertisements claimed that certain creams could remove freckles, erase wrinkles, whiten the skin, and restore youthful beauty. Women eager to achieve the fashionable, pale complexion often trusted these promises without knowing what ingredients were hidden inside the products. Some face powders and skin whiteners contained lead, a toxic metal that could slowly damage the body. Mercury appeared in certain lotions designed to remove blemishes and lighten the complexion. Arsenic was sometimes included in beauty products and even sold in small doses of a supposed aid to achieving clear, pale skin. The dangers were poorly understood by the public. A woman might use such products for years before realizing they were harming her health. The pursuit of beauty could therefore become surprisingly dangerous. Hair treatments also varied widely. Some products promised thicker, shinier hair but contained ingredients that irritated the scalp. Others were harmless herbal preparations that had been used for generations. Because scientific testing was limited, women often depended on reputation, personal recommendations, and trial and error when choosing beauty products. By evening, whether rich or poor, many women returned to familiar routines. They washed away dust from the day, brushed their hair, applied homemade creams or purchased lotions, and prepared for sleep. Some sat before ornate mirrors, while others used small hand mirrors in modest cottages. Yet across social classes, the desire remained much the same. Victorian women hoped to look healthy, attractive, and well cared for, even when the products they trusted were not always as safe as they seemed. As evening approached and lamps began to glow behind curtained windows, thousands of Victorian women prepared for social events that broke the rhythm of ordinary life. For wealthy families, a ball, concert, dinner party, or formal gathering could become the highlight of an entire season. Invitations were discussed for weeks, dresses were altered and repaired, and every detail received careful attention. Yet the excitement of preparing for a special evening was not limited to the rich. Women from every social class looked forward to celebrations, church gatherings, fairs, dances, and community events that offered a welcome escape from daily responsibilities. In affluent households, preparations often began hours before the event itself. A woman might start with a bath or careful washing, followed by hair brushing and styling. Long hair was arranged into elegant buns, curls, braids, or intricate combinations decorated with ribbons, flowers, pearls, or jeweled pins. Some hairstyles required assistance from maids or female relatives. Dressing tables became busy places covered with brushes, hairpins, gloves, perfume bottles, and small boxes of powder. Choosing a dress was an important decision. Fashionable evening gowns often differed greatly from daytime clothing. Rich fabrics, lace, embroidery, and carefully fitted bodices transformed an ordinary appearance into something far more dramatic. White gloves were considered essential for many formal occasions, and jewelry was selected with care. Yet behind the elegance stood many hours of labor. Seamstresses, dressmakers, laundresses, and servants worked tirelessly to make such appearances possible. For working-class women, preparations were simpler but no less meaningful. A factory worker or shop assistant might own only one dress, suitable for special occasions. It would be carefully cleaned, pressed, and mended before an important event. Hair would be brushed and pinned neatly, and perhaps the treasured ribbon saved for months would finally be worn. Even modest gatherings offered opportunities to feel proud of one's appearance and enjoy a few hours away from work. Female friendships often played a central role in these preparations. Sisters helped one another with buttons and laces. Mothers adjusted collars and hems. Friends exchanged opinions about hairstyles and ribbons. Conversations flowed easily as women shared excitement, hopes, and occasional worries. Some wondered whether they might meet a future husband. Others simply looked forward to music, dancing, and conversation. Not every woman attended grand balls, but nearly every woman understood the pleasure of preparing for a special evening. In a time when daily life involved hard work, strict expectations, and countless responsibilities, such occasions provided something precious: anticipation. As candles flickered and carriage wheels echoed through the streets, women across Victorian society stepped into the evening wearing their best clothing, carrying their hopes with them. For a few hours, laundry could wait, sewing could rest, and household duties could be forgotten. There would be music, laughter, conversation, and memories to discuss for many days afterward. And perhaps that was why these evenings remained so special. They offered not only entertainment, but a brief glimpse of beauty and celebration in lives that were often filled with routine and obligation. For Victorian women, few events changed life more profoundly than pregnancy. Whether a woman lived in a grand townhouse, a small village cottage, or a crowded city neighborhood, the arrival of a child affected not only her future but also the daily rhythm of the entire household. Unlike today, there were no home pregnancy tests, ultrasound scans, or regular medical checkups. A woman usually recognized pregnancy through changes in her body and by the absence of her monthly cycle. Often, the first people to know were not doctors but other women: mothers, sisters, aunts, neighbors, and experienced midwives shared knowledge that had been passed down through generations. Pregnancy was considered a natural part of life, yet it was also surrounded by uncertainty. Many women had witnessed difficult births among relatives and friends, and they understood the risks that accompanied motherhood. As the months passed, clothing needed adjustment. Contrary to popular belief, Victorian women did not simply continue wearing the same tightly fitted garments throughout pregnancy. Special maternity corsets and looser bodices gradually became available during the 19th century. Many women altered existing dresses or commissioned garments designed to provide additional room and comfort. Wealthier women could afford custom-made clothing, while poorer women often relied on sewing skills, borrowed garments, or practical alterations made at home. Daily life usually continued throughout pregnancy. Women cooked meals, cared for children, managed households, sewed clothing, fetched water, worked in shops, and performed countless ordinary tasks. A factory worker or a farmer's wife often remained active until very late in pregnancy because her family depended on her labor. Advice was plentiful. Some recommendations were sensible, while others reflected old beliefs and superstitions. Pregnant women were encouraged to avoid shocks, frightening experiences, and emotional distress. Certain foods were recommended, while others were discouraged. Female relatives frequently offered guidance based on their own experiences, creating a network of support that existed long before modern parenting books. As childbirth approached, preparations quietly began. Tiny garments were sewn by hand. Blankets were washed and folded. Cradles were repaired or borrowed. In many homes, women spent evenings stitching baby clothes beside the fire, imagining the child who would soon arrive. These small acts of preparation brought comfort during a time filled with uncertainty. Childbirth itself was usually attended by female relatives and a midwife, although doctors became increasingly involved during the Victorian era. Men were often absent from the room, leaving women to support one another through the experience. Birth could be joyful, exhausting, frightening, and unpredictable. Every family hoped for a healthy mother and child, yet everyone understood the outcomes could not be guaranteed. As evening settled over Victorian homes and lamps, cast gentle light across sewing baskets and nursery preparations, countless women dreamed about the future. Some imagined a son who would carry on a family name. Others pictured a daughter they would teach to sew, read, and navigate the world. Regardless of wealth or social position, pregnancy connected women through shared hopes. worries, and expectations. It was one of the most universal experiences of Victorian womanhood, shaping families and generations in ways both ordinary and extraordinary. For Victorian women, childbirth was not the end of a journey, but the beginning of an entirely new chapter. After months of waiting, preparation, and anticipation, the day finally arrived when a new life entered the world. Yet, unlike modern hospitals filled with medical equipment and trained specialists, most Victorian births took place at home, surrounded by familiar faces and familiar rooms. Whether in a grand townhouse or a small cottage, childbirth was usually considered a women's affair. Mothers, sisters, aunts, neighbors, and experienced midwives gathered to offer support and assistance. The atmosphere could be calm and hopeful, but it was often filled with uncertainty as well. Every woman understood that childbirth carried risks. Medical knowledge was improving throughout the 19th century, but many dangers remained. Despite these fears, women continued to face childbirth with remarkable courage. Once the baby arrived, attention quickly shifted toward the newborn and the mother's recovery. The first hours after birth were often spent resting, quietly while relatives helped manage household duties. In wealthy households, servants might take over cooking, cleaning, and laundry. Poor women rarely had such luxury. Many returned to household responsibilities far sooner than they would have liked because daily survival depended upon their labor. During the first days, mothers learned their babies' patterns of sleeping, feeding, and crying. Advice flowed from every direction. Older women eagerly shared recommendations based on their own experiences. Some advice was practical and useful, while other suggestions reflected traditions and beliefs that had existed for generations. New mothers often found themselves surrounded by guidance, whether they requested it or not. Infant clothing required significant work. Babies wore soft garments, caps, blankets, and layers designed to keep them warm in homes that could be cold and drafty. Every item had to be sewn, washed, dried, and repaired by hand. Laundry increased dramatically after a child's arrival, adding another responsibility to already busy days. Sleep was often in short supply. Victorian mothers experienced the same nighttime feedings, restless evenings, and moments of exhaustion familiar to parents today. The difference was that there were far fewer modern conveniences to ease the burden. No disposable diapers, electric lights, washing machines, or prepared baby foods existed. Nearly every task required additional time and effort. Yet amid the hard work came moments of great tenderness. Mothers rocked babies beside fireplaces on winter evenings. They sang lullabies learned from previous generations. Tiny hands grasped fingers. Family members gathered around cradles to admire the newest addition to the household. Such moments brought joy that balanced many of the challenges. Across Victorian society, whether rich or poor, motherhood created a shared experience that connected women from very different backgrounds. A wealthy woman caring for her infant in a comfortable nursery and a working-class mother holding her child in a modest cottage often felt the same hopes, worries, and dreams. As evening settled and lamps cast a warm glow across quiet rooms, countless Victorian mothers watched over sleeping babies, wondering what kind of future awaited them. In those peaceful moments, the concerns of the day faded into the background, replaced by something timeless, a mother's love for her child. For many Victorian women, marriage marked one of the most important transitions of their lives. From childhood, girls understood that one day they would likely leave their family home and begin a household of their own. Yet the path toward marriage often looked very different from the romantic stories that later generations imagined. Love certainly existed, but practical concerns such as social status, financial security, family reputation, and future stability also played important roles. Courtship followed rules that seem quite formal today. A young woman was rarely left completely alone with a gentleman. Visits were supervised, letters were often carefully preserved, and social gatherings provided opportunities for conversation under the watchful eyes of relatives and friends. A respectable reputation was considered extremely valuable, and families took great care to protect it. Once a couple became engaged, Preparations for marriage could occupy many months. Dresses were sewn, household linens collected, and plans discussed between families. For wealthy women, marriage often meant moving into a larger home and managing servants. For poorer women, it frequently meant sharing the responsibilities of earning a living while maintaining a household. Despite these differences, the emotions surrounding marriage were often remarkably similar. Excitement mixed with uncertainty, hope mingled with nervousness. One question modern people often ask is how much Victorian brides knew about married life before the wedding. The answer varied greatly. Some mothers spoke openly and gently with their daughters, explaining what marriage would involve and offering practical advice. Older sisters, aunts, cousins, and trusted female friends also shared knowledge. However, many families considered such topics private and uncomfortable. As a result, some young women entered marriage with only limited understanding of the physical aspects of married life. What they often received instead were lessons about kindness, patience, household management, and the responsibilities of becoming a wife. Mothers frequently emphasized maintaining a peaceful home, managing finances carefully, raising children, and supporting one's husband through difficult times. These conversations were usually conducted quietly between women and rarely appeared in public discussions. Wedding days themselves varied enormously. A wealthy bride might marry in an impressive church surrounded by guests, flowers, and elaborate clothing. A working-class bride might celebrate more modestly with family and neighbors. Yet in both cases, the day represented a significant change. After the ceremony, a young woman officially entered a new stage of life, often leaving behind the routines and familiar comforts of her childhood home. The first months of marriage required adjustment. Two people learned to share responsibilities, habits, expectations, and daily routines. Some marriages brought companionship and happiness. Others proved more difficult. Like people in every era, Victorian couples experienced moments of affection, disagreement, joy, and worry. As evenings settled over towns and villages across Victorian Britain, many young brides sat quietly in unfamiliar rooms, reflecting on the changes ahead. Outside, the world continued much as before. Fires burned in hearths, clocks ticked softly, and lamps glowed behind curtains. Yet for these women, life had entered a new chapter. Marriage was not simply a single day of celebration. It was the beginning of a journey filled with challenges, responsibilities, hopes, and dreams that would shape the rest of their lives. Victorian women spent much of their lives surrounded by other women. Although history books often focus on politicians, inventors, military leaders, and famous men, the daily lives of most women were shaped by mothers, sisters, grandmothers, friends, neighbors, servants, midwives, seamstresses, and daughters. These relationships created networks of support that helped women navigate the many challenges of everyday life. Long before telephones became common and long before social media connected people instantly, conversations happened face to face, often during ordinary tasks. A woman might spend an afternoon sewing beside her mother, helping a neighbor prepare food, washing clothes with relatives, or visiting friends for tea. During these moments, information flowed naturally from one generation to another. Older women shared knowledge about pregnancy, childbirth, child rearing, cooking, housekeeping, illnesses, and countless practical matters. Younger women listened, asked questions, and gradually became the next generation of advisors. For wealthy women, social visits formed an important part of daily life. Calling on friends, attending tea gatherings, or participating in charitable organizations provided opportunities for conversation and companionship. These visits followed certain social rules, but they also allowed women to discuss concerns that were rarely mentioned in public. A drawing room filled with soft voices and teacups often became a place where worries could be shared and advice received. Working-class women experienced friendships somewhat differently, but it was no less important. Women met while collecting water, shopping at markets, working in factories, attending church, or caring for children. Life could be physically demanding and financially uncertain, making mutual support especially valuable. Neighbors often helped one another during illness, childbirth, or difficult times. A woman facing hardship frequently depended on other women more than anyone else. Conversations covered a wide range of topics. They discussed household budgets, recipes, stubborn stains on clothing, troublesome children, local gossip, upcoming weddings, and family concerns. They exchanged beauty tips, showed remedies for common ailments, and compared methods for keeping homes clean and comfortable. During difficult periods, these conversations provided reassurance. A woman who felt overwhelmed often discovered that others had experienced the same struggles. Female friendships also offered moments of simple joy. Laughter could be heard during sewing circles, family gatherings, and community events. Stories were shared, memories were told, and small victories celebrated. Even in households with limited resources, companionship helped make daily burdens feel lighter. As evening approached and lamps were lit, women often gathered around tables to mend clothing, knit, embroider, or simply talk. Children played nearby while older relatives shared stories from years gone by. The work of the day continued, but so did the conversations that connected families and communities. In many ways, these quiet discussions formed an invisible thread running through Victorian society. They carried knowledge, comfort, traditions, and affection from one woman to another. And as the night grew darker outside and the household settled into peaceful silence, countless women found comfort in knowing they were not facing life's challenges alone. Their friendships, though rarely recorded in history books, helped shape daily life just as surely as any famous event of the Victorian age. When people imagine Victorian women, they often picture young ladies in beautiful dresses, brides preparing for marriage, or mothers caring for small children. Yet most women spent far more years as mature adults than as young brides. As time passed, children grew older, households changed, and women entered new stages of life that were just as important as the ones that came before. For many women, middle age brought a different kind of confidence. After years spent managing homes, raising children, caring for relatives, and solving countless daily problems, they possessed knowledge that younger women often sought. Daughters asked for advice. Neighbors came with questions. New brides listened carefully to their recommendations. These women had experienced joy, disappointment, illness, recovery, births, and losses. Their wisdom was earned through everyday life rather than formal education. In Victorian society, older women often played important roles within families. Grandmothers helped care for children, preserve family traditions, and pass along stories from previous generations. They taught sewing techniques, household skills, recipes, remedies, and family history. During long evenings, younger relatives gathered to hear stories about people and events that had occurred decades earlier. In this way, women became living archives of family memory. Not every later chapter was easy. Death was far more common than it is in many parts of the world today. Diseases that are now treatable could become fatal. As a result, many women experienced the loss of parents, siblings, friends, children, or husbands during their lifetime. Widowhood was a reality that affected countless Victorian women. For some, it brought financial hardship. For others, it meant loneliness after decades of marriage. Yet many widows demonstrated remarkable resilience. Some managed businesses, supervised property, raised children alone, or became central figures within extended families. Mourning customs were especially important during the Victorian era. Black clothing, mourning jewelry, and periods of formal grief helped people express loss in socially accepted ways. A widow might wear black for months or even years, depending on circumstances and personal choice. These customs reflected the deep importance Victorians placed on family relationships and remembrance. Daily life, however, continued. Gardens still needed tending. Meals still had to be prepared. Clothes still required mending. Grandchildren still wanted stories before bedtime. Even during periods of grief, ordinary routines often provided comfort and stability. As women grew older, their lives sometimes became quieter. The intense responsibilities of raising young children gradually faded. Evenings could be spent reading, sewing, writing letters, tending flowers, or simply enjoying conversation with family members. There was often satisfaction in watching younger generations build lives of their own. As the years passed and seasons changed outside familiar windows, many Victorian women found themselves surrounded by memories. Every chair, photograph, piece of jewelry, and handwritten letter carried stories from earlier times. They had witnessed weddings, births, celebrations, hardships, and farewells. And as they sat beside the fire on peaceful evenings, listening to the sounds of family life around them, they became the gentle bridge connecting the past to the future, preserving the stories that might otherwise have been forgotten. As our journey through the lives of Victorian women slowly comes to an end, let us spend one final evening beside the fire and visit a stage of life that was rarely discussed openly but experienced by countless women throughout the 19th century. Just as young girls entered womanhood through puberty and their first monthly cycles, older women eventually reached another important transition. Today, we call it menopause. Victorian women did not fully understand the biological changes taking place within their bodies, but they certainly recognized that a new chapter of life had begun. As monthly cycles became irregular and eventually stopped, women often experienced symptoms that modern people would find familiar. Some reported fatigue, restless sleep, headaches, mood changes, or sudden feelings of warmth. Medical knowledge of the period offered only limited explanations, and many women relied on advice from relatives, friends, and family doctors. Yet despite the uncertainty, most accepted these changes as part of life's natural progression. By this stage, many women had already spent decades caring for others. They had raised children, managed households, supported relatives, endured illnesses, celebrated weddings, welcomed grandchildren, and survived difficult years. Their identities were no longer tied solely to youth or beauty. Instead, they often gained something that Victorian society valued in a different way: experience. Older women frequently became respected figures within their families and communities. Younger generations turned to them for guidance. Their opinions carried weight because they had witnessed so much of life. A grandmother sitting quietly by the hearth often possessed more practical wisdom than any book on the shelf. She knew which remedies helped soothe a sick child, how to mend a treasured garment, how to manage a household during difficult times, and how to comfort someone experiencing grief. Daily life often became gentler in later years. While responsibilities never disappeared completely, many women finally had opportunities to spend more time reading, gardening, writing letters, sewing, or simply enjoying the company of family. Some watched grandchildren play in the same rooms where their own children had once laughed and grown. Familiar objects carried decades of memories. A worn chair, a family photograph, a teacup, or an embroidered handkerchief could bring entire chapters of life rushing back. Victorian society placed great importance on memory and family history. Older women often became the guardians of these stories. They preserved letters, shared recollections, and ensured that family traditions continued. In doing so, they connected past generations to future ones. And perhaps that is the most beautiful lesson left behind by Victorian women. Their lives were not defined solely by corsets, dresses, social rules, or household duties. They were daughters, sisters, friends, wives, mothers, grandmothers, and storytellers. They navigated menstruation, courtship, marriage, childbirth, illness, aging, and loss while creating homes and communities that shaped the world around them. As the fire grows low and this final evening comes to a close, imagine the quiet glow of a Victorian hearth, the ticking of a clock somewhere in the background, and generations of women whose lives unfolded in these rooms long ago. Their voices may have faded into history, but their everyday experiences remain surprisingly familiar to us today. Thank you for joining this journey through the lives of Victorian women. If you enjoyed spending these peaceful evenings beside the fire, listening to stories from another era, please subscribe for more Victorian-era fireside stories, where together we will continue exploring the forgotten corners of everyday life in the 19th century. Good night, and until our next story by the fireplace,